The room was golden light spilling from chandeliers like liquid fire, every glass on every table catching the glow. Dozens of phones hovered in midair, ready to capture what was supposed to be a charity dinner but had just collapsed into a public trial. And then came the sound that split the night. A sharp crack, flesh against flesh. The woman in white didn't whisper. She shouted for the entire hall to hear, "You don't measure up to me, butch." Asterisk. Her hand still hovered in the air, trembling with adrenaline, the imprint of violence burning across the cheek of the woman seated in blue. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The man at the nearest table blinked like he'd just witnessed an accident he couldn't stop replaying. Someone whispered, "Did she just slap her? In front of everyone?" The black woman sat still, unmoving. Her face turned slightly from the blow, eyes closed as if bracing for the echo more than the impact itself. She didn't shout back. She didn't even raise a hand. The stillness was louder than the insult. The woman in white leaned forward, voice slicing the silence. "Trash like you shouldn't be sitting here. Not in this room. Not at this table." Her platinum hair gleamed under the lights, her jaw locked like stone. Around her, a few guests shifted uncomfortably. Others lifted their phones higher. One young man at the back whispered, "Keep rolling, this is going viral." But not everyone looked entertained. A server at the edge of the hall froze, tray shaking in his hands. His eyes darted from the woman in blue to the woman in white, then to the crowd. His lips parted. "This isn't right," he murmured. No one listened. The slap wasn't just a strike, it was a declaration, "You don't belong." But here's the thing about belonging, it isn't decided by who shouts the loudest. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. Her name? Unknown to the guests. To them, she was just another black woman in a blue dress, quiet, maybe out of place. What they didn't know, what she hadn't yet revealed, was that this wasn't just another guest. She wasn't an outsider. She was the wife of the man who owned the very building they were standing in. She opened her eyes slowly, calm, unbroken. And in that moment, before anyone else spoke, the air shifted. It wasn't the kind of silence that ends a scene. It was the kind that warned. The real scene hadn't even begun. The slap still hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. People shifted in their chairs, eyes darting between the woman in white smirking now, proud of her dominance, and the woman in blue, who still hadn't spoken a word. To anyone else, she was just another guest. No glittering jewelry, no entourage, no spotlight. A simple blue dress, pearl studs, hair parted softly over her shoulders. She looked out of place in a ballroom dripping with chandeliers and designer gowns. That was the point. She chose to arrive quietly, to sit quietly. She hadn't come for spectacle, but spectacle had found her. The woman in white circled like she owned the stage. Her voice was high and cutting. "Do you see this? This is what happens when you let anyone walk in. Standards matter. Class matters." She gestured broadly, as though the crowd had appointed her their judge. A few guests chuckled nervously, eager to stay on the side of power. Across the room, a young waiter froze. The tray in his hands rattled with untouched champagne flutes. His mouth moved, barely a whisper. "She has a right to be here." No one answered. The crowd wasn't quiet anymore, it was restless. Phones tilted at angles, recording not just a confrontation but a hierarchy being enforced in real time. A woman in sequins muttered, "This is humiliating for all of us." Her friend hushed her. "Don't get involved." The woman in white wasn't finished. She leaned closer, lips curling into something between a smile and a snarl. "You should be grateful I'm even speaking to you. People like you. You're not meant for tables like this." The words were deliberate, not whispered, projected like policy. Still, the woman in blue sat steady, not a tremor, not a glare. Her stillness wasn't weakness, it was weight, pressing on the room until even the chandeliers seemed too heavy to shine. Then came the escalation. The woman in white snapped her fingers toward the entrance. "Security, get her out of here! She's embarrassing the entire event." Her tone was casual, like she was asking for more wine. But her words carried the sting of command. Two suited guards by the door shifted, uncertain. They hadn't moved yet, but the request was hanging there, daring them to act. Guests murmured louder now. Some wanted. The scene ended quickly. Others leaned forward, phones raised, eager to catch whatever came next. The young waiter set down his tray. His voice, though quiet, reached the table nearest him. "This isn't policy, this is prejudice." A woman across from him frowned, torn between agreement and fear. And through it all, the woman in blue remained composed, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the table. She didn't rise to defend herself. She didn't protest. Her silence cut sharper than any rebuttal. It wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Because what the woman in white didn't know, what no one yet understood, was that the target of her fury wasn't an intruder. She was seated exactly where she belonged, and her patience was not passivity. It was the calm before revelation. The ballroom was no longer a celebration. It was a theater, and the woman in white was the lead actor. She thrived in the spotlight, raising her voice until it cut through the strings of the band still playing faintly in the corner. "Do you think this is a place for you?" she barked, her words echoing under the chandeliers. "Women like you slip in, hoping no one will notice. Not tonight. Not here." The woman in blue didn't flinch. She adjusted the hem of her dress with a calm hand, the gesture so ordinary it unsettled the crowd. One man muttered, "Why isn't she saying anything?" Another answered, "Maybe because she doesn't need to." But the woman in white mistook silence for weakness. She lunged forward, snatching the small clutch from the woman in blue's lap. Gasps shot across the room like sparks. A black VIP card tumbled onto the marble floor, sliding until it stopped at the foot of a table. The woman in white scoffed and pressed her heel against it. "Fake, just like you. I've seen better props on stage." Her laugh was sharp, rehearsed, like she had waited for this moment. Phones tilted closer. A young man at the back, maybe 25, whispered as his camera rolled, "She just stomped on her card. This is getting ugly." By the doors, the guards hesitated no longer. One stepped forward, hand hovering near his radio. The woman in white pointed like a queen commanding pawns. "Remove her, right now. She's a fraud, and she's disrupting my event." But before the guard moved further, a voice rose from the crowd. A woman in sequins, the same who had whispered earlier, stood up. "Disrupting?" She hasn't said a word. Heads turned. For a second, the room split, half watching the aggressor, half drawn to the quiet defender. The woman in white's face tightened. "You don't understand. This isn't about words. It's about standards. Look at her. Look at us. Does she look like she belongs here?" The cruelty wasn't casual anymore. It was venom, meant to strip dignity in front of witnesses. The young waiter, still hovering near the edge, set his jaw. His voice trembled but carried. "I checked the list this morning. Carter, penthouse level. She's valid." Murmurs swept through the crowd. "Carter?" The name landed, heavy but not yet clear. The woman in white snapped at him. "Stay out of this, you're just staff." But it was too late. The air had shifted. The attack was no longer private, it was public record, captured on phones, etched in memory. The woman in blue lifted her head for the first time. Eyes steady, gaze cutting through the noise. She didn't speak yet. She didn't need to. Because sometimes the most powerful line is the one held back until the exact moment it will break the room in two. The clutch still dangled from the hand of the woman in white, her heel grinding the black card into the marble as if humiliation could be stamped permanent. The crowd buzzed like a hive, restless and uneasy. Some laughed nervously, others whispered into their phones. But the woman in blue remained still, her breathing even, her eyes steady. Silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. She lifted her gaze slowly, letting it move across the room without urgency. Her calmness unsettled more than shouting ever could. A man near the bar muttered, "Why isn't she fighting back?" Another answered, "Because she doesn't have to." The woman in white mistook it differently. She leaned down, voice dripping contempt. "Say something. Defend yourself. Or are you too ashamed?" No answer, only the faint clink of glasses somewhere in the back, the awkward shuffle of guests caught between spectacle and shame. The guard who had stepped forward tightened his grip on his radio. "Ma'am, if you'd like, we can escort her out now," he said to the woman in white, as if awaiting her permission. She smirked, emboldened by the illusion of control. "Yes," she snapped. "Do it. This imposter doesn't belong here." But before he could take another step, a younger voice cut through the murmur. The waiter again. "She belongs here. Her name is on the list. I saw it myself." The room froze. Guests turned. The woman in white scoffed, waving him off. "Your staff. Nobody asked you." Yet his words lingered. They hung heavier than the slap, heavier than the insults. Proof, however fragile, had been spoken aloud. The woman in blue remained silent, but in her stillness there was weight, a quiet dignity that grew louder with each insult hurled her way. She adjusted the sleeve of her dress, an almost imperceptible gesture that said more than any protest. "I will not be moved," the woman in white hissed, desperate to regain control. "Then I'll move you myself." She reached down, fingers curling toward the woman's arm. Gasps erupted before contact was even made. The guests shifted forward in their seats, phones trembling in their hands. It was no longer entertainment. It was escalation. And yet still no reaction from the woman in blue. Not a flinch, not a blink. Her silence pressed like a storm cloud over the room, warning that lightning was closer than anyone realized. Because sometimes the most dangerous calm isn't the pause after chaos, it's the pause before it. The woman in white's hand hovered inches from the woman in blue's arm. The moment felt suspended, stretched thin as glass. Then came the sound of a camera shutter, soft, almost respectful, but loud enough to tilt the air. A man near the back had lifted his phone higher, its red recording light glowing like an accusation. "I'm filming this," he said, voice shaking with conviction. "People need to see what's happening." The woman in white spun, fury flashing across her face. "Put that down. Now. This is private property." But the man didn't lower his phone. He squared his shoulders. Then maybe private property shouldn't look like public humiliation. The crowd gasped. A line had been crossed, not by violence, but by witness. A younger woman, seated 2 tables away, found her voice. "She hasn't even spoken. You're the only one shouting." Her words cut through the murmur like a match striking in the dark. Heads turned toward her, toward the woman in blue, then back at the aggressor. The woman in white bristled. "You don't understand. People like her—" She stopped herself, but the pause said enough. Phones tilted higher, capturing every unfinished sentence. A middle-aged man in a tux muttered, not quite whispering, "This is discrimination, plain and simple." His companion tugged at his sleeve, hissing, "Don't get involved." But the room was already involved. The waiter stepped forward again, trembling but resolute. "Her name is Carter. I saw it this morning. She's on the VIP list." The word Carter rippled across the room. Recognition flickered, though no one yet connected the dots. The woman in white sneered, trying to claw back control. "Staff siding with frauds now? Do your job. Stay invisible." Yet the damage was done. The hierarchy had cracked. The aggressor was no longer the unquestioned voice of authority. She was a spectacle unraveling under the glow of chandeliers and smartphones. The woman in blue remained still, her silence commanding more loyalty than shouting ever could. She placed her hands gently on the tablecloth, posture unbroken, eyes calm as though she had already decided how this story would end. And the crowd felt it. They didn't know why, they didn't know who she was, but they felt the shift. Because silence, when held with dignity, doesn't erase you, it amplifies you. The room trembled with tension. The name Carter still floated in the air, but the woman in white seized on it like it meant nothing. She lifted her chin, eyes flashing. "VIP list or not, this woman doesn't belong here. Guards, remove her now." The taller of the 2 security men stepped forward, his shoes striking the marble like a gavel. He didn't look at the woman in blue. He looked past her, as though she were already invisible. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to leave with me." The man with the phone shouted, "Leave. She hasn't done anything." His words echoed, drawing nods and murmurs from scattered tables. The woman in white snapped back, "She's trespassing. She's a fraud, pretending to be someone she's not." She picked up the black card from the floor and tossed it onto the table. "A stolen card, I bet. That's what they do." The word they landed like a blade. A gasp tore through the crowd. A woman near the center stood, her voice trembling with anger. "You don't get to say that. Not here." Her friend tugged her arm, but she didn't sit down. She stayed standing, eyes blazing. The guard's hand hovered near the woman in blue's shoulder. "Ma'am, stand up. Don't make this difficult." The woman in blue didn't move. She kept her gaze level, her breathing steady. That stillness rattled the guard more than defiance ever could. He shifted on his heels, unsure. The aggressor pounced on the hesitation. "Do your job. You're paid to keep people like her out of here." Phones tilted higher. The waiter stepped further into the light, voice steady now. "She's not some stranger. She's Carter, and she belongs here more than anyone." A murmur swelled. Guests whispered the name Carter, Carter with growing weight. The aggressor's smirk faltered for the first time, but she doubled down. Lies. All of it. She staged this. Some social stunt to embarrass me. Her voice cracked on the last word. The woman in blue finally lifted her head fully, eyes locking on the guards. Calm. Controlled. Her silence spoke volumes. If you touch me, the consequences won't end with you. The chandeliers above seemed to flicker as if the room itself held its breath. What no one realized yet was that the storm wasn't building, it had already arrived. They just hadn't seen the lightning strike. The guard's hesitation cracked the room wide open. Guests leaned in, phones steady now, no longer sneaky but bold. Every lens waited for the next misstep. The woman in white snatched the black VIP card from the table again. She held it high like evidence in a trial. This is nothing. A toy, a fraud's trinket. Then, with a deliberate rip, she tore the card in half. The sound was small, but it echoed like thunder in the charged silence. Gasps ricocheted across the ballroom. Someone shouted, "That's theft," another muttered, "She can't do that." The woman in white wasn't finished. She dropped the torn pieces at the feet of the woman in blue, sneering down at her. "Pick it up. That's where you belong, on the floor." The insult struck harder than the slap. Phones caught every angle, the fragments of a card, the glint of contempt in her eyes, the quiet composure of the woman in blue. The guard shifted uneasily, his radio crackling faintly at his side. "Ma'am, maybe we should verify." "Verify what?" the aggressor snapped. "That she lied her way in? That she thought she could sit among us? Look at her dress. Look at her. She doesn't belong in this room, and everyone here knows it." The words fell like a gavel. "You don't belong here." A murmur swept through the guests. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others shook their heads, disbelief turning into anger. The waiter clenched his fists at his side, his voice shaking but firm. "She does belong. More than you'll ever know." But the woman in blue remained seated, shoulders squared, posture unbroken. She looked at the torn pieces of her card, then back up slow, deliberate, her eyes locking onto the aggressors. She didn't speak. Not yet. And that silence, the refusal to rise, to scramble, to explain, was heavier than the chandelier light, heavier than the whispers of the crowd. It was defiance in its purest form. The aggressor faltered, just for a breath, but pride pushed her forward. "Security! Drag her out! I don't care what it takes. People like her will never belong here." The guard's hand hovered again, but hesitation froze him, because in the pit of his gut, he knew something about this wasn't ordinary. Something about the calm of the woman in blue warned him, "Touch her, and this night will end in a way no one expects." And he wasn't wrong. The torn card lay in fragments at her feet, tiny black shards against polished marble. The woman in blue lowered her eyes to them, not with shame, but with calculation. Then she reached into her clutch, what was left of it, and pulled out her phone. Her movements were deliberate, unhurried, as though the chaos around her was theater she had already seen 100 times. She tapped once, lifted the phone to her ear, and spoke just 3 words. "It's happening now." Her voice was low, steady, the kind of calm that unsettled everyone within earshot. On the other end, a reply came instantly, firm, controlled, male. "Understood. I'm on my way." The guard paused mid-step. The aggressor froze, frown flickering across her face. "Who are you calling? Who do you think you're threatening?" The woman in blue didn't answer. She didn't need to. Gasps stirred through the crowd. Phones caught every detail, the coolness of her tone, the precision of her words. This wasn't panic. This was protocol. The waiter's eyes widened. He understood first. This wasn't just a guest calling for backup. This was someone with access, someone who expected obedience when she spoke. The woman in white tried to laugh it off. "Oh, please. You think anyone cares about your little call? You think someone's coming to rescue you?" But her laugh cracked halfway through. The woman in blue slipped her phone back into her clutch and folded her hands neatly on the table, as if the matter were already resolved. Her posture radiated finality. Not waiting, not begging. Waiting only for the clock to strike. Guests whispered more urgently now. "Who is she?" one asked. "Why does she look so calm?" another pressed. The murmurs grew, mixing with the relentless sound of recording phones. The guard glanced at his colleague. Neither moved. The air between them was heavy with unspoken warning. This wasn't a woman you laid hands on without consequences. The aggressor felt it too, though she fought to deny it. Her lips curled, voice brittle. Fine. Sit there and wait. When they drag you out, don't say I didn't warn you. But her voice no longer carried the weight it had minutes earlier. Power was slipping, not with noise, but with silence. The woman in blue sat poised, eyes unwavering, as though she could already see the door swinging open, already hear the footsteps that would change everything. And in her calm, the room understood. The humiliation wasn't hers, it was theirs. The ballroom doors creaked, and a hush swept the room like a gust of cold air. Heads turned in unison. Phones tilted toward the entrance, waiting. He stepped inside, tall, composed, dressed in a black suit that caught the light like steel. His presence shifted the air, the way a storm changes the pressure before it breaks. He didn't stride. He didn't rush. He walked with the certainty of someone who owned the ground beneath his feet. The woman in white froze mid-sentence. Who are you?" she demanded, her voice thinner now. He didn't look at her. His eyes went straight to the woman in blue. She lifted her head, calm, lips curving into the faintest smile. No words passed between them, yet the exchange was louder than the slap that started it all. Then he turned, finally, to the aggressor. His voice was low but carried to every corner. "The woman you just humiliated," he paused, letting the silence settle heavy, "is my wife." Gasps broke like glass shattering. The waiter's jaw dropped. The man with the phone whispered, "Oh my God." The woman in white staggered back, eyes darting around for support that wasn't there. "Your wife?" she stammered. She can't." But he wasn't finished. "And if that weren't enough," his voice sharpened, "this venue, this entire event, belongs to me." Silence. Pure, deafening silence. Even the band in the corner stopped pretending to play. The aggressor's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Guests exchanged glances, whispers colliding. "He owns it? He owns all of this?" The waiter stepped forward, relief spilling out of him. I told you she belonged." His voice cracked, but it didn't matter, he was right, and the room knew it. The woman in white's hand trembled, still clutching the torn remains of the card. They no longer looked like proof of fraud. They looked like evidence of her own downfall. The black CEO didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You thought silence meant weakness. You thought dignity was disposable. But tonight, you didn't just insult my wife. You insulted me. And I don't forget. The chandeliers above seemed to flare brighter, as if the room itself acknowledged the shift. The aggressor took one unsteady step back. For the first time all night, she looked small. The words hung in the air like a verdict. "This venue belongs to me." For a moment, no one moved. Then the room erupted not in noise but in shock. Phones shot higher. Screens glowed like 1,000 tiny spotlights. Every angle, every second, was being captured and broadcast. The woman in white staggered, her bravado shattering. She looked around for allies, but the tables that once smiled with her were now stone-faced, lips pressed thin, eyes avoiding hers. The confidence she wielded like a weapon only minutes earlier was gone, replaced by the crushing weight of exposure. The waiter, still clutching an empty tray, looked both terrified and vindicated. His voice cracked as he whispered to no one in particular, "I told the truth. People saw it. They'll know." The man who had first lifted his phone glanced at the screen. His live stream comments were exploding hundreds, then thousands. "This is insane," he muttered. "The whole world's watching." The chandeliers above flickered, as though even the light strained under the shift of power. The second guard, the one who hadn't moved, slowly stepped back, his hands raised slightly, signaling surrender without words. He didn't want to be remembered on the wrong side of this footage. The aggressor's voice finally broke through, desperate, pleading. "Wait, I didn't know. I wasn't told. If I had known—" The black CEO cut her off with a look, sharp enough to slice through her excuses. Guests began murmuring openly now, their voices no longer restrained. She slapped his wife. In front of everyone, she tore up the card. Each sentence was another nail in the coffin of her reputation. The woman in blue still hadn't spoken. She didn't need to. The dignity in her silence was amplified by the collapse happening around her. The waiter stepped closer, daring now. "Sir," he said quietly to the CEO, "if you need my statement, I'll give it. I saw everything. His words trembled, but they were steady enough to be heard. The CEO nodded once, just enough to say, "Your voice matters." Across the room, a guest lifted her phone, eyes wide. "My video just hit 10,000 views." Another gasped. "Mine's at 20. A tide was building, irreversible, undeniable. And in the center of it all, the woman in white collapsed into the reality she had created. A predator minutes ago, now a spectacle for the world to see. The black CEO stepped forward, his presence filling the room. Calm, deliberate, unstoppable. The kind of presence that made even the guilty stop breathing for fear of what came next. The ballroom had become a courtroom. Every chandelier was a spotlight, every phone a witness, every whisper a verdict already forming. And at the center of it all, the black CEO stood tall, calm, unshaken. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice carried because it didn't tremble. "You slapped my wife. You tore apart her card. You told her she didn't belong. That was your last act of authority in this room." The woman in white stammered, I didn't know. I didn't mean—" He raised a hand. Silence fell like a command. Intent doesn't erase impact, and ignorance doesn't cancel consequence. He turned slightly, his gaze sweeping toward the security guards. "Effective immediately, she is barred from this venue. Escort her out not as a guest, but as someone trespassing on what she does not own." The taller guard shifted uncomfortably. The second one stepped forward first, his face pale. He nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Gasps scattered through the crowd. Phones zoomed closer, catching the shift in power, the guards no longer answering to her but to him. The aggressor's knees buckled. Please, I can explain." But the CEO wasn't finished. His gaze cut toward the event manager lurking near the back, hoping to stay invisible. "And you allowed this. You enabled this spectacle. You're done. Your access is revoked, your contract terminated, tonight." The manager's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, realizing there was no argument to make under 100 recording cameras. The CEO pulled a phone from his inside pocket. One tap, one call. "Log tonight's incident," he said crisply. "Freeze her VIP status. Terminate the manager's contract. Effective now." On the other end, a voice responded immediately. "Processing. Credentials revoked. Access terminated." A beat later, a sound echoed through the ballroom, the sharp buzz of a badge reader turning red. The manager fumbled at his chest. His access card was useless. Locked out in real time. The guests gasped again, murmurs flooding the air. He just cut him off. Right here, in front of everyone. The CEO's gaze returned to the woman in white, still clutching the shredded remains of the card she had mocked. "You wanted proof she didn't belong. Tonight, the only thing proven is that you don't." Her lip trembled. "Please, I made a mistake." He stepped closer, each word measured like a final sentence. "A mistake is spilling a drink. A mistake is mispronouncing a name. What you did was deliberate. It was violence dressed as etiquette, and it ends here." The waiter, still holding his empty tray, whispered under his breath, "Justice." The CEO turned to him, then to the others who had spoken up. "You stood when it was easier to stay silent. That matters. You'll be remembered." The man with the phone lifted his screen higher. 100,000 views, he said, half in awe, half in warning. The world was already watching. And in that moment, the black CEO gave the final order. "Escort her out. Tonight, she leaves in disgrace. Tomorrow, she won't step foot in any space carrying my name." The guards moved, not with hesitation this time, but certainty. They took her by the arms, not rough, not violent, but firm. The woman in white sputtered excuses, pleas, bargains. None of them mattered. Because in that ballroom, under the chandeliers, with every phone raised, her downfall wasn't private, it was permanent. And justice, for once, wasn't delayed. It was delivered instantly, decisively, in the very room where injustice had begun. The ballroom, moments ago a place of cruelty, was now charged with a different kind of energy. Guests rose from their seats one by one, not to leave, but to witness. The guards guided the woman in white toward the doors. She clawed for words, but her voice was drowned under the swell of murmurs and the click of 100 phones capturing her exit. Every chandelier beam seemed harsher now, unforgiving, spotlighting her disgrace. When the doors slammed shut behind her, the room exhaled as if justice itself had entered the air. The black CEO didn't gloat. He didn't bask. He turned instead to the woman at the center of it all, his wife still seated in her simple blue dress, unshaken, unbroken. She hadn't raised her voice once, and yet her silence had overturned an entire room. He stepped beside her, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. His words carried not just to her but to everyone present, amplified by the hush. They told her she didn't belong, but the truth is simple, this place belongs to her. The line cracked through the hall like thunder. Applause erupted. Not polite, not hesitant, thunderous, rolling applause that shook the tables and rattled the glasses. Some guests stood, clapping until their palms burned. Others lifted their phones higher, wanting the world to see the exact second dignity was restored. The waiter dropped his empty tray onto a side table and clapped too, his face flushed with relief. The man who had filmed from the start grinned at his screen. 500,000 views, he whispered, disbelieving. The whole world is watching. The woman in blue rose at last. She didn't make a speech. She didn't need to. She simply lifted her chin, looked around the room, and met the eyes of strangers who had nearly accepted her erasure. Her gaze was calm, but it demanded something: reflection, change, accountability. For a moment, no one breathed. Then a voice rang from the back. The woman in sequins, the first to speak against the insult, called out, "We're sorry." She wasn't alone. Others echoed it, low at first, then louder. "We're sorry." Not to excuse, to acknowledge. The CEO nodded once. Regret means nothing without change. Remember tonight, when you think silence protects you, silence protects no one. It only feeds cruelty. His words landed like a final gavel. The applause swelled again, rolling like waves. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, some with tears in their eyes, some with shame on their faces, but all united in recognition. This was no longer just a party. It was a reckoning. The woman in blue took her husband's hand. Together they stood at the center, framed by the golden light above, no longer quiet, no longer underestimated. They didn't need to shout to command the room. Their very presence had rewritten it. The band in the corner finally found courage to play again, but it wasn't background music anymore. It was a score for triumph, for justice. Phones streamed live to millions, but for those in the room, the lesson burned deeper than any viral clip. Prejudice humiliated her, dignity dismantled it, and truth closed the night. The CEO gave the final words, measured, unforgettable. Power doesn't come from volume. It comes from knowing who you are and never letting anyone take that away. And with that, the applause became a standing ovation.